Greg.
Yes.
When I say dad, you say... No. Start that again. Oh, man, I had that built up in my mind. When I say rad, you say...
Dad.
Rad.
Dad.
Rad.
Dad.
Dude, we're back at it.
Yeah, man.
How long since the last one?
Oh, jeepers creepers. That would have to be, I don't know.
We're talking years now, eh?
Like 2018,
we can
19?
say pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID. That's always that funny marker. And I think the weird thing is now that we're getting to that point where we're now going, that's a reference point. We're now... This thing that's coming up is now closer than COVID was.
Absolutely.
I was having a conversation with my oldest daughter the other day, and where the number of Christmases between her now and her leaving for college is now less than the Christmases between where we are currently in COVID, if that makes sense.
It does. You're triggering me because you talk to your oldest daughter. I talk to my youngest daughter.
Yeah.
And she said to me, Dad, is shut a bad word? And I said, no. And she says, is up a bad word? And I said, no. So why can't I say shut up? And I said, darling, you can.
You can. Yeah, we're just going to roll with it.
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
Because I think that's the crazy thing. Because how old's Marvelly now?
6. It just goes fast. So when we started the RadDads journey, we were RadDads to young
ones.
Kids.
Yeah. And
we've seen them kind of start growing, go through puberty, enter puberty. It's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah, and I think it's like just when you think that one season and you've got it all locked down, a whole new season emerges and you're worried and concerned and then excited and, the emotions just continue to evolve. And I think, again, it's the gift of parenthood that keeps on giving. It's like...
It certainly keeps on giving.
Yeah, and taking too.
Maybe that's what I mean. I've got an 18-year-old who's finished school, trying to find his way, lives at home, and like his poos smell like my poo. So it's like another dude in my house. And I'm like, oh, this is different to... And then I asked them, do you remember like growing up and all the cool things we did? And they're like, no.
Nope, no recollection.
I'm like, oh, what's the deal here? And I think this is the time in life where they've just got to kind of test themselves on you.
Yeah.
But like, I don't remember our podcast being about that part of RadDads, do you?
No. Time and place. But I have heard it. I have heard it said to me once. It's like the easiest way to deal with teenagers is just treat them like they're brain damaged. Because to be fair, if you ask, you talk to most psychologists, they'll say the adolescent brain is effectively brain damaged. So that's what I'm rolling with. I'm just going. You're going to be brain damaged for a few years. You'll come out the other side. We'll reconnect. It'll be fine.
A question for you. Why do you think we stopped this podcast? What was it about? It was kind of pre the podcast bubble. We were early adopters. We were building this nice community. We were featured on the news. We had our denims out there for the world to see. We were asked to come on TV. And then I guess like maybe the age where we're at, we're trying to, get the dad thing right, get our ambitions kind of squared away.
To be honest, I think it's a fantastic question to ask because I don't think we've got an answer. Well, I don't have an answer for it. I think if anything, it was almost like the snowball got too big. We're running alongside it, trying to manage that in amongst the myriad of being dads and being husbands and just trying to kind of make life happen. And I think it's almost like the snowball got ahead of us. We're sort of starting to see it get bigger and bigger and bigger and went, wow, that's really overwhelming. But I think, again, if you cast your mind back, and I'm sure it's the same for you, I've lost count of the number of times that I get to reference the absolute adventure that it was. I'm recently, I'm 14 months into a new role. And I just love being able to roll out. Well, have I told you about that time that I was doing this thing with my mate, and we started an online community for dads? Oh no, I haven't heard about it. Yeah, we threw rugby balls out of a helicopter on television. Pardon me. But inherently in it, there's been just a multitude of life lessons as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think I'll show you this.
Yeah,
you'll appreciate this. I posted about it on social, but. I think one of the lessons was, side story, context about this is...
hold it up for those viewers. I don't know which camera's there, Guy. What does it say, Greg?
World's greatest dad.
Yep.
And as much as I'd like to think that was something that I'd made for myself, it wasn't. That'd be kind of weird. But my youngest son came up to me. Mum was away for work, and I was trying to fly solo and kind of get everything done. And I was a little bit stressed, and he starts beavering way in the corner, and he comes to me with this bucket of, there was this, a mandarin, a little miniature trophy that he'd found somewhere, and a piece of paper, and saying, number one dad. And it was funny because I think I look at that moment and I think about what RadDads taught me was to sit in the moment and allow people to tell you who you were to them. And I guess for that moment in time, we were hopefully some sort of hope that things would be okay. You'd work it out. If these two clowns could kind of work out how to manage to get on TV and do all these other things, parenthood wasn't a massive jump.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned today from that time, is just to be able to sit and go, you know what? Put my ego, oftentimes, I don't know how it was for you, but my ego oftentimes would get in the way of letting me be okay with other people telling me who I was to them. And I think that was ultimately what RadDads was, an opportunity to be put in a position where I was forced to just be okay with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think about you referencing the helicopter. And so for those who probably don't know, and I'm just wondering if that's at a deep level why I wanted to stop, because I was kind of hurt that we didn't. So anyway, let me explain the story. 2018?
Yeah, something like that.
We found, a champion who believed in our mission to do cool things as dads. His name's Tom. He worked, or I think does work, at Power Shop, a big power company. And he's like, I'm going to give you some money. Go and do your Guinness World Record. And so he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, we've been toying with the idea of catching catching a rugby ball from a helicopter.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, go do it. And so two randoms who had full-time jobs, trying to make it all work, we did it. But there's a metaphor where we had it all set up. The stars were ours to align.
Yep.
And, with just the bit you've missed was the science behind it, the physics of you throwing a ball out of a helicopter 100 and something meters in the air,
yep,
the blades pushing the ball wherever it was going to go, everywhere apart from me on the ground.
But the interesting thing is again, you dial it back and I go, I will not and I didn't and I will never ever forget showing up to the helipad, and the sun, it was the most beautiful day. The sun was just coming up behind, out on the harbour and whatnot, and we're walking out and there's not one, but there's two helicopters, and there's a helicopter for us to go out. And then we're taking out multiple news crews, and I remember we had this kind of moment where we were like, well, I guess we've already won to a certain extent.
Yes, I understand that sentiment. I think the bit that haunts me a little bit about it is, and it's a metaphor for lots of things, everyone that day was connected, just not you and I. And I mean that physically. Everyone had comms. The chopper was talking to tower. The news was talking to each other. But I couldn't hear you saying, I'm going to drop the ball now. And so I couldn't see you. Yeah. And I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, shit, I need to be able to talk to that dude.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a metaphor for fatherhood.
Yeah.
That you actually, in that moment, everyone needs you to do it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, useless if you don't have a line of communication to your partner, whether that be your mate on the day or the person who, is your better half at home. And it was a reminder that if you go after that big dream, you've got to make sure that you can and speak to the person who you're trying to dream with.
100%. And it's so interesting that I've just been made aware of it just now. I don't think it's coincidence that we find ourselves going into Mental Health Awareness Week.
Yeah.
And again, I think looking back to why we did what we did, and especially for dads, and being able to go, all right, well, take stock. Where is that communication line at the moment? How is the comms with the better half? How is the comms with, there's 2 or 3 mates that might be in a circle? Are you isolated? Are you trying to do the thing and you're finding yourself just coming up short, and that frustration that I guess is, to be honest, I wasn't frustrated at all. I was just terrified. I was just terrified. Only the second time I'd ever been in a helicopter, and they're telling me that we're going to be flying with doors off. And then, oh yeah, he doesn't need any extra restraints while he's throwing balls out of it. I was just dealing with the sheer adrenaline of trying not to fall out of the damn thing.
That's hilarious. Do you think we'll ever kind of look into that abyss again?
I think so. I want to. I really truly do. And I just think about, just the evolution of kind of your life and finding the lane and the passion and all of those things that you gets you out of bed in the morning. And the same for me. I think those things have evolved and changed.
Yeah.
But obviously that through thread of fatherhood still remains the same. And yeah, I don't know. It feels like it would be remiss not to reflect on this next block of trying to make it.
I think the other thing maybe to acknowledge too is like, just because we weren't so regular on our RadDads journey, we were still keeping in touch.
Yeah, 100%.
And we'd check in and we'd touch base. And you're that person I say when I'm in the car and I'm thinking, who should I call? There's like two people, you and the other guy in this room. But the other guy in this room is probably sick of hearing from me because it's work related. But for you and I, we can always kind of connect over like, how's everyone going?
Yeah.
And I guess we're lucky in some ways, right? That we already had that bond, and that's what we were attempting to show others. That it's not it's like you don't have to. Mental health and connection is not actually this thing that no one can achieve. It's at most the podcast is a vehicle for talk therapy, which is how everyone needs to get out what's in. And we've done podcasts around mental health in the past, and like that's the single biggest thing. If you're holding it in, stand by for an avalanche, just can't hold it in.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's one of those things. It's like until you've experienced burnout, until you've experienced that, those traumatic mental health events, you don't know. And that's not in a way that is meant to be dismissive or excluding of those who have been blessed, fortunate, lucky, whatever, to have not been in that boat. But you really, truly don't know, and it will sneak up on you. It will sneak up on you before you know it. And I think the other interesting thing, I'm, right in the midst of our journey. It's not ironic, but I ended up going into a situation where I spent almost 18 months in some pretty intensive counselling around a few things that had cropped up for me. And I think the crazy thing was it wasn't till I'd come out the other side that could you reflect on it and go, I have absolutely no clue how I even functioned. You feel literally like a different human being. And I think that's, I don't know. I hope that would be the message that we could champion and continue to champion in our various areas, is that get into it, be vulnerable. And I think that, that's ultimately what underpins what we tried to do. We tried to say, hey, look, it's a little bit outside the norm for a couple of dads to put themselves out there and attract attention. And despite what it might have seemed on camera, neither of us are particularly geared towards wanting to chase that.
Yeah.
When I think we're pretty comfortable wanting to be back there.
Yes.
And sit in the background and push other people into the light. But for that moment in time, I think the lesson was be vulnerable, be open, be brave enough to be torn down.
Yeah.
And we were torn down and
they tore us to shreds on the news. Hillary Barry. I've never watched it. I don't have the courage, and I don't know if I ever will.
Yeah.
She was like, look at that guy. He's got the wrong shoes on. That's what someone told me. And I did have the wrong shoes on because I thought I would be running on like a concrete.
Yeah.
But I mean, my shoes were multi-purpose,
Minor detail.
No, it's an interesting chapter in our life, and I'm sure we'll have many.
I'm keen to know.
Yeah.
So obviously the helicopter was the start of it, but we did a truckload of other things. Who did you find our most curious guest? Listen, diving into and listening to other people's stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because where we are politically, if you mention like National, for example, you're just going to turn off a bunch of people. But the Prime Minister then, after John Key said, "I've had enough," was Bill English. And he did an interview for our RadDads show. And I thought at the time that was a really interesting thing because he didn't have to, you know. And podcasting wasn't what it is today. It was more just around these random guys. And I thought, you know, it was pretty scary. Like we went up to this building that was still being built, and they thought it was a great idea because I guess they could control the variables and.
Apart from me knocking a glass of water.
That's right. Yeah, a few on the game nerves and what is it called? The GC
Diplomatic Protection Squad.
Yeah. So they really look at you, and they're like, you know, all their training comes in, and I don't remember if they patted us down, but certainly like they were like, who are these two random dudes? And I just remember, man, how are we going to make this person, this fella Bill, seem like a dad? Because I knew he was a dad and I knew he'd be up for it. But there's those lines of comms hadn't been established. And so, you know, I remember saying to you, hey, I think I'm going to ask him, Dad's a dad, can we just call you Bill, not Prime Minister? You know, and I should research more. I don't know the protocols. I'm a bit like, you know, the women's rugby team hugging the king.
Yep.
That's something I'd do, you know, but because I think that's cool. But of course you break protocols. And you're like, yeah, go on then. I've just got to tidy up this water I spilled. And so I did. And I said, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, permission to, you know, speak to you dad to dad, call you Bill. And he was like, yeah, no problem, mate. I was like, phew, you know, and we actually had a chat around fatherhood. And so I don't know if he really shared, you know, hugely vulnerable things. I believe he did. He said things like, regardless how busy it was, he tried to make it home for tea. You know, I think that's kind of a different type of leadership outside of the political realm. Yeah. Very easy to trade your family in for opportunity, and we're all probably guilty at some point of doing it. And I just remember leaving that thinking that was cool, you know, regardless where you sit politically. And it wasn't the same then as it is now. You know, things are a bit more divided and lines are firmly drawn, but I still maintain that as a father, you have an obligation not to stick to that line. You always have to cross it. You know, you always have to work on both sides.
It reminds me of a good friend of both of ours, Cliff Thompson, being able to, he, you know, often talks about it's not about what makes us different. It makes us what makes us the same. And I think fatherhood remains as one of those things. It's like regardless of geopolitical views or ethnic backgrounds or whatever, at the end of the day, a dad's still going to want a particular set of things for their kids. And I think that, again, we've got to hold on to these things that make us the same in a world that, you know, everybody's looking to try and assert their little piece of the world that makes them different. And that remains a really unique opportunity. Pete Bethune was the one for me.
So give everyone a recap of Pete.
Eco warrior is probably the I guess the best way to describe him. And he is out there. He's, you know, saving the world and saving the environment. And
he fights pirates.
He literally fights pirates. Yeah. And so, just crazy stories. But again, I think the juxtaposition of fighting the good fight, but there's always a cost, and there was always a cost. And listening to him, you know, talk with, I guess, a tinge of regret about what the cost of that had been, was a real challenging thing to think about, and going how you approach those opportunities. There's always an opportunity to go out and fight the good fight, and you think you're doing a great thing. And I think so often there's a lot of times where dads get tripped up by that. You know, they're out fighting the good fight, providing, doing what they think is the right thing to do. And then they come back home and all of a sudden it's like, it's a mess. And they get a little bit confused and frustrated because they're like, well, but I was doing the right thing. And I think I found that was a real challenge to reframe the way I looked at opportunities in my own life.
Interesting.
It was always a case of, all right, well, this is cool, but what's the cost? There's always a cost.
Yeah.
And I think that was the one that really solidified for me that there's never not a cost. And if you're being led to believe that there isn't a cost, somebody's lying to you.
Yeah.
And that's not in a negative way, but just in a way where you just got to be realistic and go, all right, well, full transparency. This is what I'm being asked to do, or this is the opportunity, and this is what it's going to cost me. And at least if you make that decision, you make it mindfully aware of all the consequences, as opposed to going in blind and almost having that regret months down the track when you haven't acknowledged those negative things that could happen. So that was really interesting for me.
Yeah, and I can remember Pete, saying something around the best service you can do is sometimes the smallest ones in your community. Like, are you part of your community organization? And I'm not part of those things. And so it always, you think about it,
Yeah.
And look, nothing's perfect, and you can hammer yourself about anything. But ultimately, I wonder if sometimes it feels right to save the world or catch a rugby ball from a chopper.
Yeah.
Where it's about, can you be patient reading a book to your daughter at night? And this is very difficult for me,
Yeah.
Because they're the same books.
Yeah.
And I start yawning, and I hate that about me, that like, just be patient. But it's very difficult in real time.
But also knowing what that tiny little stretch that's happening at home, how that's making you that much more malleable for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, whether that's in home or out of home. I'm really interested to unpack, because one of the things because obviously there's this huge personal component and personal growth part of talking about fatherhood and being a dad and just all of that stuff. The flip side of this whole journey for me was also, I guess I've spoken to a number of people about, like, take the two of us out of the equation in terms of just a simple case study around what happens when you commit to producing content at scale, the opportunities that come as a result of that. And I think I'd like to hope that we were at least okay at what we did, but I look at the opportunities and the doors that were open simply because, and largely due to your insistence to keep us on the grind. I'm actually genuinely blown away, and I often share with people within a business context around what happens when you commit to taking up a narrative and producing content that aligns to that, where you can go. Because literally this whole thing was, for those that don't know, Will and I happened to work at a tertiary institution at the same time. We've not known each other prior to that, but it was a lunchtime. We kind of went, oh yeah, shall we do it? And we had adjacent offices, and then all of a sudden we're looking up what the world's highest rugby ball catch was, and could we get Richie McCaw to come fly the helicopter?
Took a call with us.
Yeah, he did. And
he said, I love the idea, guys. I'll just run it past my manager. And then his manager called me and says, there's no way he's doing that. And I was like, you sure? He's like, yep, but nice try, but hung up.
You're like
if you do,
you're a dick. But I think, but that was it. Like literally, that was the genesis. There was nothing more unspectacular than, two aspirationally minded individuals, aka dreamers, that went, you know what? I reckon we could. And I think for me, that's again another really, really massive lesson, because it's almost like you look back and some of the stuff isn't real.
Yeah, 100% being flown around, having cool wagons to drive, kind of like living like influencers before
they were cool. Thing.
And we didn't even have to wear a G-string. Well, I don't know about you.
No comment. No. I just remember sitting in the breakfast green room, and when we first showed up to be on live television, and kind of going, how on earth, what right do you and I have to be here, other than the fact that we've been brave enough to talk about something that was meaningful to us?
Yeah. And totally unprepared, eh? Like, should have had good answers to questions, but answered from the heart.
Yeah.
I think it was Jack Tame, who's become quite a hardcore interviewer. And with us, he was, I guess, genuine, but, he was like, what's the hardest thing about being a dad? And I remember being like, where do you start, Jack? Like, there's lots of things.
Yeah.
And they're all, I guess, things that you don't really want to say to people who haven't had kids, because the opposite is true as well. Every one of those hard things has an awesome thing attached, you know? And, so like, you know, when you hear people say, the family's pregnant, or, you know, my wife's pregnant, and then everyone's like, oh, dude, get your sleep in now. Like, that's a stink thing to say. You know, you shouldn't say that because this is not always true. And I was talking to some parents over the weekend. We catch up every now and then. And we were thinking back to the past, also thinking that you were younger, you had more energy, you had a lot more naivety - optimism, but you had to. You got these little lives on the line that literally, you know, don't go well if you don't feed them and look after them.
And I think that that's the thing is that, you know, 97.5% of parents, you know, they are surprised by just how deep the reserves go. And just, you know, I think that's the conversation I've had numerous times with, you know, parents to be or new parents is that you will absolutely blow yourself away with how little sleep you can actually function on.
Or what rewards, like, tell me that story again, Greg, about you and Katie would go for one, you know, thing at the mall once a week.
Yeah. So we were. So I had this idiotic idea that I could start a family, start a business, not own a home, and live in a shared mutual friend of ours basement in one bedroom, and it'll be all okay. And it was one of those times in your life where you look back and you go, wow, like. I think, according to my tax return, I didn't even have enough money to pay the rent, let alone feed a family and all the rest of it. Anyway, you know, naivety sent me down this particular path. But I just remember vividly, and we've told our kids, I now have 4 kids. We had 1 at the time. And I just vividly remember going, the absolute highlight of our week was we lived within about a 6 or 7 minute walk to our local shopping centre. And we got out of our little tiny box for 45 minutes on a Friday night. And we had just enough money to pull together to have 1 butter chicken combo between the 3 of us. And it was the most heavenly thing of our week. We were absolutely eyeballs deep in the grind, trying to make it work. You know, Katie was trying to recover from what was a relatively traumatic birth, just trying to just work it out. And it became a thing. And, you know, eventually Molly became big enough that she would want things to do, and she sat on the carousel. We didn't have enough money to put in the carousel. She just sat on it, and she thought it was cool. And yeah, we've talked numerous times about it, but just making sure that under no circumstances you don't lose the gratitude for those moments where you find yourself being able to get up. And I'm absolutely blessed now to be in a position whereby I can take my family out and we can all eat a butter chicken combo. And that might seem relatively inconsequential, but it's something that's never lost because of that moment. And I think also learning to go, as life evolves and changes, what about those elements can you find in the new moments as you might be in a position where you have more means or more opportunity or whatever. Just, keep it grounded.
Well, you also wonder, in those moments, is that where that love is formed or forged with you and your partner? And like, if I think about it, because I have similar things that I'll put my wife through, what the hell were we doing? Like, why were they with a couple, dreamers?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, It's like, and I'm not saying that it will all work out, but man, that is some love there to be like, all right.
Shout out to both of them.
Absolutely. And there'll be plenty of, mums or mum dads around the place who are doing exactly that, where you're just like, it's very normal to live in your credit card at some point.
Yeah.
And I just remember that was normal.
Yeah.
And so we weren't panicked about it because it's like, what else do you do?
That's what
Yeah. And you got kind of some options, but they're not heaps of options. But the ironic thing about maybe having a few extra dollars in the bank is that you still replace whatever was going in your mind with stuff going in your mind now. So I guess that's just the way life forces you to keep going, and that's okay. But it's in these reflective moments where you're like, man, we were probably a bit more on the edge than we give credit for.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But again, I think it comes back to what's the underlying driver. And I mean, I think it's really interesting that you referenced the whole dreaming part. And it's like, I unequivocally would be telling people, chase after that thing. And of course you've got to be grounded and practical and all the rest of it. And if you've got obligations, you've got to feed them and you do what you got to do. But I know that, ironically, I wouldn't have made it out of that if I hadn't held on to the possibility of dreaming and failing and making mistakes and all the rest of it. If I'd been, all right, here's a plan to work to, and it involves me doing something that I'm not all that into, I know we would have fallen flat on your face. I can't even remember whether we had this conversation. Savannah Bananas, did we have that conversation? Oh, awesome baseball team in Savannah, ironically. And cool story about a guy and his wife that moves to Savannah. They buy an old ballpark, and I think it was 6 weeks in, something like that. They ran out of money. The day they took it over, this sort of beautiful idea of restoring baseball in Savannah, Georgia was just taken blown to bits. They named the team. Everybody hates the name of the team. Anyway, long story short, you jump forward, I think it was 3 years. You now cannot buy tickets to that game for the next 3 seasons. They are sold out. They've now got so big that they're not in the little ballpark that they bought. They have to sell out major league stadiums around America. They've done all sorts of cool things. Anyway, the founder, he talks about the guy in Major League Baseball who got the highest number of, I think it was home runs. He said the stat that people overlook with him is that he had 2,000 more at-bats than anyone else as well. So he says the math says that it's only inevitable. So he stepped up to the plate and he scored more home runs, but we're not looking at the right numbers. We're looking at the fact that he stepped up to the plate and failed 2,000 more times than anybody else as well. And that's always stuck with me about making friends with failure. Get up, swing that bat and swing it and keep swinging it, because eventually you get the record. And again, this was an opportunity to get up and swing. And I just think that would be, especially now for dads, don't stop swinging.
Greg, you're way more talkative in these podcasts since we got older. That counselling worked.
It's just opened me up.
That's fantastic. It's like normally I'm the blabbermouth, but
yeah.
dude,
Sorry.
Come on, put it here, man. That's awesome. I guess as we kind of conclude this session, and it's been a blast re-catching up with you. One of the things I didn't think we would do, actually, and it's just one of those awesome little milestones that you get to loop back around to things, and it's, you just never know how things are going to play out, similar to having a family. But do you ever think about how your kids will remember you? Not the version of you that you aim to be, that you put out to the world, that other people recognize you as. Like, what do you think? And I hope they listen to this one day, because I'm sure they will, trawling back through all our stuff. But what do you think or hope that they will remember you as?
Well, I mean, right from the outset, when Katie and I got married, one of the first things that we talked about before kids even was legacy, and not in a self-serving kind of way, but I guess going intergenerationally. Yes, I got that out. What was the line in the sand where we wanted to be able to have our kids look at our family tree and go, this is kind of where maybe some of the maybe not so good things began to be righted? What are the things that we want to go with distinctly us? Honestly, I really, really hope that my kids remember me as someone who gave a crap, genuinely cared about people and things, and would go into bat for the little guy. I think if when it's all said and done, that's what the takeaway is, and not afraid to step out on a limb and speak for those that don't have a voice. If that's what they take away from all of the time that they got to spend with me, mate, I'll be over the moon.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yourself?
I would like to think that they think I meant well. Like we could see that he has his own little systems in life. Clearly for them, they understand that one of the things that I'm very thankful to have is a, very kind, relaxed, loving upbringing. At times, I don't know what to do with that in the world, in the areas I try and serve, and that creates conflict within me, I did a session the other day by reading a book, and I'll name it just so everyone knows that I'm not making it up, but it's also a bit embarrassing, called Millionaire Mindset. Something like that. Something with a millionaire in it, which is very embarrassing to say out loud. But it talked about your why. And I've struggled with whys. I think I've told you that too. Like the Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek, yeah.
He talks about your why, and I'm like, I don't get it. You're not explaining it in a way which I get it. But this dude explained it in a way in Millionaire Mindset, Millionaire Habits, one of the two. And he talked about your why has to be an answer from your heart, but most of our answers are from your mind. So he says you have to ask yourself, what's your why? And the first answer you give, to provide for my family or to be a solid member of society, you need to ask those questions 7 more times and trace it down to your heart. So, why do I want to provide for my family? The answer might be because my parents provided for me. Why is it important to you that your parents provided for you? Because I grew up feeling like I belong somewhere. Why do you, and it goes on and on. And the outcome to this was that, and I'm not saying this is a gospel or a contract, but where I got to was, I need to create and work and live in environments where I feel safe. And I kind of fought the resistance to have to justify that. That's just how I am. And so that needs to stack up for me, or else these other things, these conflicts are in me. And so that might be working with people, working for somebody, interacting with the world, that if those things don't feel right to me, I've got to either decide to go with it or go against it. And I'm not 100% on where I sit on it because you can't control everything. But it was a nice thought experiment, And so I think that looping back around to your question, I'd like them to understand, my kids to understand kind of what was a driver for me, even though it wasn't obvious. That probably I was trying to create a harmonious environment, whether that's a dream in itself, with the complexity of humans and all of these interwoven parts. But I do like that I've stumbled across that line of thinking, because that certainly registers for me. Some of the best moments in our podcasting was when we did feel like we were in a harmonious link-up, whether it be through taking Stephen McIver through drive-through and him saying in his voice, I've never eaten a Big Mac, and now he's the America's Cup dude, and just creating harmonious environments, but it's all masked as a podcast. And I think I still try and do that. I still try and think that talking is an awesome way, but, that's why we called it Campfire Studios. It's like you talk around a campfire, but you can mask it however you want. You can say it's heat. You can say it's cooking for food. You can say it protected us against animals in the past. But one of the elements is that it created a connection, So, yeah, come on, kids. See me that way.
I have no doubt that will be the case.
Awesome. Well, are we going to do this again?
What?
The podcast.
Oh no, sorry. I was like, what am I signing up to? Absolutely, man. I think yes, for sure. And I think the great thing is that you reach that point where it's like, if nothing else, for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And if somebody somewhere happens to get something out of it, then that's cool. But yes, I'll be keen to put another one in the diary, and we'll make another one happen.
Until next time.
Cheers, man.
Be what? Be a radical dadical?
Not a radical dadical.
Oh gosh. Awesome.